Are you thinking about moving to Denver? Well, let me give you some hot tips to make it a smooth transition. Today, we're talking with my partner, Roger Grayson, and soon to be realtor, which we're excited about. Thanks for being here, Roger.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And what we're talking about today is relocating to Denver. And if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and follow, do all the things. So 2025 did this regular seasonal thing that we always see where the median sales price of houses from January to December, it goes like this. And so oftentimes you will see a very similar median sales price in January and December, but in the meantime, prices drive up and then they kind of drop back down a little bit. So again, my best advice to anyone watching this is do not pay attention to news headlines when it comes to the housing market. Not only do they always want to talk about how high interest rates are, which is not true, because something in the low sixes has always been one of the lowest interest rates that you could get in real estate, or I guess I should say in mortgages, aside from the pandemic years, which was an anomaly, but also just the seasonality of how it goes. So if you've been looking at the headlines lately, there is a lot of talk about how the prices are coming down. The prices are coming down. Oh, real estate's going down. Oh, wait for the bottom, wait for the crash. All of that is BS because the prices in December of 2025 were very similar to the prices in January, just like they always are. Now, the market has been very steady the last 2 or 3 years since the interest rates shot up in 2020, the middle of 2022. 23, 24, and 25, if you look at the data together, and I'll be releasing this on my social media, these graphs and charts that show the median sales price January through December, 23, 24, and 25. And they're all very close together. Those lines are very close. So that's telling us that we have a pretty steady, almost flat market right now. What's going to happen in 2026? What's going to happen is, I think, what always happens, which is statistically, as soon as the Broncos get done playing, whether it's before the playoffs, in the playoffs, or at the Super Bowl, statistically, when the Broncos are done playing, that's when we have this big push of buyers that come out and really start shopping. And that kind of kicks off what we call our spring selling season, even though it's in February. But we call it the spring selling season. And that's when those prices start to drive up. So the best time to list your home is typically February through April, because then by the time we start getting into May or June, it's kind of iffy. It depends on the year. If the season is still strong in May and June. Some years when it's not as strong, it sort of ends in April versus May or June. So getting your house to market February through April is the recommended time frame to hit the best time of the year to get the most money for your house. So if you're relocating to Denver, you just need to know that, right? That you're going to be competing with buyers, with many other buyers more in that time period. And I guess one last thing I'll say is that houses that are priced appropriately and look good, and they are turnkey or move-in ready, those houses are still moving. Even with this flat market, the slower market, we have serious buyers that were continuing to shop through December. They've already started shopping in January. So this idea that the whole market has just, slowed down or is in some sort of nosedive, it's just not true. However, sellers who have not come to grips with the fact that we are not in a seller's market anymore, some of them are overpriced. And it shows. There is no reason for a home to sit on the market for 100 days or even, 90 days. I mean, our median days on market right now is like 30 to 40. So if you see a home that's on market much longer than that, so I'm talking 60, 75, 90, over 100 days, it's priced too high. Every house will move if it's priced appropriately.
Well, what does coming in strong actually mean for buyers in Denver?
Maybe the best way to answer that question is to talk a little bit about like what my standard process is with buyers, because I meet with buyers, I do a buyer meeting with them so that we can talk about what does this process look like? What are you about to embark on as you decide to buy a home? And part of what I'm doing is setting up expectations and helping to answer questions and educate them about this. And so some of this stuff is just standard stuff that I would tell any buyer. But it can be different, very different from market to market because real estate is so local. So one of the first things that in my mind is like a no duh, like isn't everyone doing this, but maybe they're not, is about the pre-approval. We want to make sure that you are pre-approved and not just pre-qualified. So it is possible for you to call a lender and tell them what you think your credit score is, tell them your income, tell them what debts that you have, your car payment, if you have a mortgage payment, any credit card debt. And there are lenders out there who will, at that point, with that little bit of information, give you a pre-qualification. I would never take a buyer shopping with that kind of pre-qualification. So when I take buyers shopping, they have filled out the application, they have uploaded all their documents, the lender has run that through the automated underwriting system, and in some cases, we've even run it through underwriting. And so what that does is that gives us a very strong pre-approval, a no surprises pre-approval is what that's going to be. So now when we're going out shopping for homes, not only are we not looking at homes that are not in our price point or their price point, but we are also able to, when we submit an offer, we submit it with that lender pre-approval letter. Now, what happens next? As the seller is considering the offer, one of the things that listing agent is going to do is call the lender. And they're going to ask the lender what kind of approval this is, what work has been done up front. And I will say that in our market, if you've got good listing agents on the other end of this deal, if they talk to that lender and find out that you haven't done that full pre-approval, they're not going to be as likely to recommend that their seller accept your offer.
Also, working with a great realtor like Kiki helps.
Yeah, definitely. And I know I've got a video about how to choose a good realtor. So you should definitely check that out because it has all kinds of great tips for that. Maybe we should talk about price ranges, because people come from we were just talking about how in Washington and California, the West Coast is higher prices. In December 2025, our median price point on single family homes is $620,000. So that means half the homes sold at or under that and half of them sold at or over that. And our median days on market was 41. So we expect that in the wintertime, the median days on market to be longer. But right now, and especially as we move into the spring season, I'll be interested to see what our median days on market, because they'll shorten up during the spring season. But I'm curious if they will remain at a 30. 30 days on market is kind of a normal or average. It's a comfortable days on market. And you compare that to the pandemic years where the median days on market were 3 because everything was just gone on the first weekend. But we've been seeing 30 pretty regularly, and then it stretches out to 40 during the winter. So I would think 2026 is going to be very similar to that.
We've talked about pre-approvals and price points. Are there any other things that are going to help you in this market?
Help buyers coming to Denver? Yeah, definitely. We also talked about hiring a good realtor, right? And And I think part of hiring a good realtor means that you're going to be submitting a nice, clean offer. Listing agents love to see what we in the biz call clean offers. And to me, what that means is, our contract is like 24 pages long, right? Like it's a lot. And so when you're just getting started in real estate, or when you're a part-time real estate agent, you just don't know that contract, as well as you could. And you don't maybe know it as well as some people who are more experienced. And so when I am on the listing side and I'm getting contracts from a buyer's agent, almost always we can look through that contract and tell how good the agent on the other side of the deal is, just because of the way that they write their contracts. So I would say, writing a clean offer with very few contingencies, and this contingency thing, a sale contingency, that's when you have to sell your other house before you can buy this house. And even still, that sale contingency was practically non-existent during the COVID years. You could not really buy anything if you were waiting for your house to sell and you just had to figure it out. We had a lot of post-close occupancies, right? So they sold the house. Now they have the money that they can go make an offer on another house, and they've got the money sitting there, right? And even today, even in today's market, it has been a while since I've seen an offer with a sale contingency. I mean, I know that they're out there because people have to do that sometimes, but in my experience, they're still few and far between. So getting your house sold wherever you're coming from and then coming here, and whatever that means, whether you're staying with friends or maybe you're renting or an Airbnb hotel or, extended stay hotel, you're going to have an easier time getting a house if you don't have a sale contingency on your offer.
And maybe even, being a little more flexible on your closing timelines or possession or.
For sure. Like if you were making an offer on a house and the seller was saying, I need to stay in the house because I need to find my next house. If you could give me, a rent back or a post-close occupancy for just a week or a couple weeks, whatever it is. If you're willing to do that for a seller, that can help your offer a lot.
So how does Denver's high altitude and climate affect your home?
I guess I'm just starting off laughing on this one because I'm thinking about the north-facing driveways.
Yeah, we've all experienced that.
So if you're coming from another climate that doesn't have snow and ice like we have here sometimes in the winter, one of the things that we've talked about is this idea of north-facing driveways being awful. Like you don't want a north-facing driveway. Because what happens is in the winter time, where the sun is positioned means that your house and your garage are creating a shadow on your north-facing driveway, and that shadow is so much that that the sun isn't able to warm up and melt the ice or the snow that's there. And I spent a long time in Minnesota where we have so many snow plows and everything gets plowed right away as soon as there's an inch or two of snow. In Denver, it's not like that. So we don't always get snow all winter long, but when we do get it, it can dump on us. So we might get a foot of snow at a time, and they're plowing the highways and they're plowing some main streets, but they are not plowing side streets.
I've noticed.
Yeah. So because the weather is such that it usually melts all the snow after a few days, even if we get a foot, like we're using the weather to take care of our snow problem, not snow plows. So anyway, if we're counting on the weather to melt away snow and ice, on your driveway, you really got to keep up on those north-facing driveways and keep them shoveled. Otherwise, they just become a really icy danger, I'll say.
Well, how does the dry climate, which is something I love about Denver,
Yeah.
coming from the Northwest, which is a very rainy climate, humid climate, the humidity here is much lower. It is much drier. How does that affect your home on a year, annually? Is there things that you recommend or?
I think that the dryness of the air, you have to keep in mind how that works with wood, because the wood floors, wood trim, wood cabinets, they can shrink and crack. And so it becomes even more important, especially on the exterior, things like decks and balconies and fences. It becomes even more important that you're taking care of those things in a good way, which is sealing them. And I think off the top of my head, I want to say that you're supposed to seal wood like every 3 to 5 years. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's right. But yeah, they are taking a beating from not only the sun, but also hail. So back to the wintertime problems. Insurance has been it has become a bigger problem, I guess I'll say, in real estate. We've had some fires that have wiped out some places. But the hail is really the biggest damage causing thing to the roofs. And it's been so bad that there are insurance carriers that have actually pulled out of Colorado altogether. They're no longer writing new home policies in Colorado because they don't want to take on the risk of all of that hail damage. And when I'm shopping with buyers, what we're looking for. What are we looking for?
A new roof?
Yeah. It can be problematic to find an insurance carrier who will cover a roof if it's over 10 years old. And so whenever I'm looking at listings with buyers and I see in the listing description that it has a new or a newer roof, I mean, anything within 10 years is just fantastic, because once you get older than 10 years, now it becomes kind of an issue with insurance. But it's kind of thought that even though the roofing materials will last for 30 or 50 years, there's no roof that's going to last that long in Colorado, because at some point, the insurance carriers know they're going to have to replace the roof because of hail damage.
So we talked about roofs and hail damage and north-facing driveways. What other issues do you think a home might suffer from just through, with the weather here in Denver?
Yeah, the winter months. That's a good question, especially for people who are coming from warmer climates, or they maybe aren't used to winters, right? I think that the freeze-thaw cycles, right? Because even in January, which is a winter month, we will have temperatures up to 70 degrees. In fact, that was when I decided to move back home to Denver. I was actually here for my grandpa's funeral, and it was a January, and there was a day that I was driving around with my windows down because it was 70 degrees. And that was the day that I was like, okay, I'm moving back. And so we get these freeze-thaw, freeze-thaw, freeze-thaw all throughout the winter, which is very different from, I know not a lot of people are coming here from Minnesota, but in Minnesota, man, we get into the winter and it's freeze, and then it's freeze, freeze, freeze for 6 months. There's not a lot of thawing happening up there in those winter months, but here it's freeze-thaw, freeze-thaw. And so that can definitely have an impact on concrete driveways, but also foundations. So, if you're shopping and you're seeing any kind of cracking in the foundation, I'm not so worried about it on the driveways. I mean, it's a driveway. But if you're seeing cracking in the foundation, always a good idea to check with a structural engineer. I know that my guy, it's like, I want to say $300 or $400 for him to come out and take a peek, take a look around. And wow, that is money well spent on your 500, 600, $1 million property, to spend $300 or $400 to have that foundation checked out. Well worth it.
Yeah, it gives you a little more peace of mind when you get in there.
For sure.
So let's go back to talking about how dry it is here, because I know I'm using definitely some more lotion.
In the winter. Yeah, definitely in the winter. It does get dry. And so there are some, not all homes, but there are some homes here you will find that have whole home humidifiers.
Yeah, I've never seen that before.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't because you're coming from the humid climate.
Yes.
Yeah. So those are usually, it's like a box that you see that's kind of attached to the side of the furnace, or at least that's where I've seen it. I don't know a lot about humidifiers, but I do like the idea of having a whole house humidifier because I can only imagine that it would save money on your lotion bill.
So speaking of Denver's climate, what specific home features matter more here in Denver and the surrounding communities than other cities?
I'm going to go back to talking about roofs again. So there's a newer type of shingle that they call a Class 4 impact resistant shingle. And some roofers have started here in Colorado have started making that their standard. That's just the shingle that they use whenever they're re-roofing anything. Also, some cities have implemented local ordinances. I know Fort Collins is one. I mean, that's a little bit out of Denver Metro, but there are cities that have said when you're doing a new roof and you pull the permit and yada, 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 they're expecting to see a Class 4 shingle on that roof. They actually have said, just quit, just stop putting anything other than this Class 4 shingle on the roof.
So what's the difference between a Class 4 shingle and just regular shingles that we've been using for years on roofs?
It's the impact resistantness. I don't think that's a word, but when the hail comes down, depending on what size the hail is, it's coming down out of the sky, it's dropping on the roof, and a regular shingle, for hail that's, I don't know what the size is exactly, but, once the hail gets to be a certain size, when it drops on that shingle, it's making a little indent in it. And that's the hail damage. So you have your claims adjuster come out from your insurance company or the roofer, and they're looking at how many of those little divots or dips or dimples do they see in a certain area of the roof. And as soon as they get over a certain threshold, because it's like if they see 3, it's no big deal, but I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but they count them. And when they get up to a certain number, now that roof is eligible for replacement because it has too many of these little divots. So that Class 4 impact resistant shingle is made in such a way with such a sturdiness that when these, I think I read somewhere that hail up to 2 inches in diameter could drop down on a Class 4 shingle and it would be just fine.
Well, what kinds of other things are we looking for, like with regards to maybe your foundation, like, here in this climate where maybe it doesn't rain as much as it does in Seattle or other places, but how important is that grading and drainage around your foundation?
Yeah, because we did talk about looking for cracks in the foundation, but grading and drainage, I'm going to go out on a limb here and I'm going to say I think that's important in all climates. But it's a great thing to touch on, right? Because I can't tell you how many homes that we tour that as we're going around the outside of the home, I can see where they are not making sure that water is directed away from the foundation. And you never want moisture coming inside the house or sitting up against the foundation. And there's a bunch of different ways that can happen. Like people who put a bunch of dirt in a flower bed next to their foundation, that's a no-no. My inspector will call it out every time. People who take the downspout from the gutter. So the gutters are directing water, right? The water's coming off the roof, it's coming into the gutter, and then it's being directed down a downspout. Now, you should have a downspout extender, right? That's then taking that water and extending it away from the foundation and getting it away. And if your grading is right, then you've got water going away from the house. So if your grading is flat or like this, it's directing water back to the foundation. So that's not cool. But also those downspout extenders can be a pain in the butt and they are inconvenient, right? People will put them up, and stand them up because you have to for mowing or whatever sometimes. And then they just never put them back down. And so I'm walking around these homes all the time that have these downspouts that are either just completely removed. So now you've got the downspout, or the extenders are removed. So now you've got the downspout and it's just sitting right next to the foundation. And I just think, oh, well, that's where all the water is going, right next to the foundation. And who knows how long it's been doing that. So I hate to see that. And I know I'm hitting on it kind of hard, but like, it's just terrible for the foundation.
So something new I learned after moving to Denver and subsequently starting to look for a new home is that there are sections of Denver and the surrounding areas that are called metro districts. And I'm getting familiar with those. And there is a source that we use online to see where they're at as we're looking for homes, either to inform our buyers or just for ourselves, while we're looking. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. So Metro District is kind of like an HOA, okay? Because some of them are, it's sort of like neighborhood or community based. And it might be that they have like a clubhouse or a playground or some sort of like neighborhood infrastructure that they take care of that would be kind of like an HOA. There might be some rules. They might take care of like trash, like your trash might be through the Metro District. But here's the kicker. So it's not a monthly payment like you would pay separately to an HOA. It is wrapped into your property taxes. So, and I should back up and I should just say what it is. What happens is a builder works with the city to develop a new neighborhood, a brand new neighborhood, right? And or this is my understanding anyway. And this might not be true for all metro districts, but the builder and the city get in cahoots together, and the builder goes, "Hey, city, I'm going to build this nice new neighborhood for you. And we're going to need curbs, and we're going to need sidewalks, and we're going to need streets. We're going to need a fire station and a playground and all this stuff to make it a little community." But the builder doesn't want to lay out all the money for that. Nobody ever wants to spend their own money. So the builders have figured out how to get money from the government for this stuff. And so it's a loan. So the city is like, sure, we'll loan you this money. So they give the builder all this money to do this project. And the way that the city is getting paid back is by rolling it into people's property taxes. So the builder does all the work, the city pays for it, and then the homeowners who live there and are benefiting from it, they are now paying it in their property taxes. Now, in my opinion, I don't want to have anything to do with a metro district because, again, in my opinion, it is way too similar to an HOA. They've got control over things and that I don't want somebody to have control over, and we were just looking at these property taxes because when we're working with buyers, we are looking at the purchase price. Are there any seller concessions? Is there an HOA? What are we estimating will be their homeowner's insurance cost monthly? And then we have to add in property taxes. So as a buyer is shopping, we're really keeping an eye on what they want their max monthly payment to be. That includes property taxes. There are a lot of places around the city that property taxes are maybe, I'm going to say, between $2,500 and $3,500 for the year. Now you get into metro districts, and those property taxes look more like $3,500 to $4,500. And I saw one yesterday. I had buyers go look at something today that it was over $8,000. And that's a lot. That's a lot to add into your monthly payment. And all you're doing is taking away from your purchase price, from how much money that you could afford. So you could afford more house outside of a metro district than you can inside a metro district.
So now that we've discussed all those things about relocating to Denver, why is understanding these factors critical for a smooth relocation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think maybe as you've been watching, it becomes kind of apparent, like things that you might want to look out for, or things that might be different than what you're used to in your market coming from somewhere else. But I think one of the biggest thing is that it can prevent costly surprises after you get into your home. Like just the thing about roofs, right? Like knowing that now when you put a roof on your home, you really need a class 4 impact resistant shingle. And be nice for you to know that ahead of time instead of at the time that it's happening. But this kind of stuff allows people to make smarter long-term decisions, reduces their stress during the buying process because we've already talked about these things. And so they're familiar with the process and what to expect. What kinds of things are we going to be inspecting? Just again, using the roof as an example, knowing that we're going to be looking for a roof that's less than 10 years old. But just setting realistic expectations about the market. We talked about how many days on market you could expect to see, what the median price point is. So hopefully this helps you get familiar with the Denver market. And if you're planning to relocate here, definitely reach out to me. I've helped several people relocate to Denver, not just Roger. And it's always fun. I love welcoming people to Denver because we have such a great city here, and the people are fantastic. So I love it when we have more fantastic people who want to come and join us here.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I think, everything we've discussed today really makes it that much more important to find a local, full-time, active realtor who can guide you through this process and make sure it is seamless.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely important. Well, thank you so much for being here, Roger. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Being part of the conversation and adding in your 2 cents since you had recently relocated to Denver. So it was fun to have you on for this episode.
Yeah, same. Thank you.
So if you're relocating to Denver and you want some expert guidance and assistance, definitely reach out to me before you start shopping. If you like this content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go.